Good evening and welcome to a special edition of the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. A year that will be written about for decades finally comes to an end. Legalized recreational marijuana begins in Illinois. The Senate acquits President Trump in his impeachment trial. Trump commutes former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich's prison sentence. And then,
today, the World Health Organization officially announced that this is a global pandemic.
The coronavirus takes hold.
To avoid the loss of potentially tens of thousands of lives, we must enact an immediate stay-at-home order for the state of Illinois.
We're all looking to Washington.
With millions unemployed and a crippled economy, local and state governments look for federal help.
If there is to be an uprising, let it be for peace.
After the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, protesters take to the streets. The summer's civil unrest leaves some businesses looted and property damaged, and the city reeling from its most violent weekend in many years.
Too many people in Chicago have been touched by gun violence.
Homicides and shootings surge. President Trump loses the election, but continues to promote baseless and conspiratorial claims of voter fraud.
We won the election by a landslide. We won it big.
The federal investigation into alleged ComEd bribery grows, strongly implicating Mike Madigan and putting his historic tenure as House Speaker in jeopardy.
Help is on the way.
As the year closes, and with more than 330,000 coronavirus-related deaths, the U.S. begins rolling out 2 vaccines and gets ready for the administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And joining us now from various locations around town are Steve Daniels of Crane's Chicago Business, Kelly Bauer of Block Club Chicago, Laura Washington of the Chicago Sun-Times and ABC 7 News, and Dave McKinney of WBEZ. Let's dig into that death toll from this year. More than 332,000 people have died of COVID-19. That's more than 16,000 here in Illinois and 4,000 in Chicago. Dave McKinney, when historians write the book of this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, what will the final verdict be on how political leaders handled this, from Trump all the way down to Lightfoot?
Well, I mean, I think the legacy for President Trump and the handling of the pandemic here is pretty much already written. I mean, I think, from the inability to provide ample testing to the rollout of the vaccine to his continual denial of the real scope and size of this, I think the lot's been cast as far as President Trump goes. I think with Governor Pritzker and Mayor Lightfoot, it's a slightly different story. I mean, what you see happening, Illinois and Chicago have suffered. We have suffered to the extent of 16,000 people, more than 16,000 people. That's 1 out of every 800 Illinoisans dying from COVID. But yet, these guys have promoted mask wearing. They've promoted social distancing. They've taken steps to really bring people, to try to tamp down this disease. And so I think, for them, there's at least a chance that history will remember them as being responsible stewards when it comes to the pandemic.
And with no coherent national strategy, it really was all states for themselves. And it's, you have different governors having different ideas of how they thought they should manage this. Laura Washington, the experience of coronavirus has been different based upon whether you're white, whether you're affluent, black, or Hispanic. Talk about how different communities have experienced this year.
Well, I think the results of and the ongoing crisis just reflects the social and social and cultural and political inequities that have existed in this country on so many different levels, particularly around the healthcare system. People of color have always borne the brunt of poor healthcare, poor access, poor opportunity, and you're seeing that front and center in terms of who's being affected by COVID and how they're surviving. If you look at the Chicago numbers, something like 80% of the people who passed away from this disease were people of color, even though obviously they don't represent 80% of the population. And that is because of the deep and vast inequities in the healthcare system. And it also goes to the lack of...
I'm going to interrupt because we're looking at some of those numbers right now. 39% of black Chicagoans, 34% of Latino Chicagoans, but go ahead.
Right. It also shows it's just an example of inequities that go across a scale, and people are suffering because of COVID, in other ways, public education, the significant majority of people of color occupy Chicago public schools. Those schools have not been in session. Economic development, jobs, over and over again, you see how COVID is striking very hard at the heart of communities of color.
Steve Daniels, you know, in March, Governor Pritzker made the decision for a stay-at-home order exempting essential business. In hindsight, was that the right move in terms of saving lives versus hurting small business and the economy and unemployment?
Oh, I think so, especially given what he knew at the time. But even in hindsight, the numbers were scary and heading in a really frightening direction. And, you know, taking those kinds of steps, limiting interactions, you know, we were talking a little bit about the different performance of different politicians. And for so many, you know, the year 2020 is going to be remembered as just an awful year, and rightfully so. But one of the things that I think is a glimmer, at least in Chicago, and I'm a Chicagoan, and was that people tried, generally speaking, to behave responsibly and cared about each other. They wore masks outside. They wore masks in stores without complaint. You couldn't see that. You did not see that in other parts of the country. But in terms of what the governor did at the time, I thought it made a lot of sense. It obviously was incredibly damaging, but a lot of the economic damages, at least in the short term, weren't so bad due to the immense federal response.
And Kelly Bauer, the country is in the midst of a second wave right now, although some might say the first never ended. We spoke with Chicago's top doctor, Allison Arwady, earlier this week about where the city stands right now. Let's first take a look at what she said.
We're still having more than 1,000 cases a day here. That positivity is still not where we need it to be. So we hope, again, we know a lot of people did alter their holiday plans, and we hope that New Year's also will be more of a time for quiet New Year's with the family as opposed to some of these large gatherings.
And Kelly, so we were talking about the shutdowns and the moves by Governor Pritzker. The state and the city really did get that positivity rate down low for most of the summer. It shot back up in the fall, and it's coming back down again. Do you think that Illinois and Chicago are out of the worst of it?
I think that officials have said we need to see what happens after these most recent holidays like Hanukkah, Christmas, and then New Year's Eve is coming up in order to see what kind of impact those could have. In Chicago, for example, we did see a small surge after Thanksgiving, although that's kind of slowed down now, whereas Illinois did not see a bump like that. So they're waiting to see what kind of wave we might see or might not see after these winter holidays to determine if we are a little more out of the woods or if it's safe to roll back some of these mitigations.
And of course, President-elect Biden has warned that January could be the worst month yet of this pandemic, even though the numbers have gone down now in Illinois. Dave McKinney, 2021, the year that the vaccine is going to become available widespread. Public health officials have said perhaps by June, most Americans will have access to it. Do you believe that that's a realistic time frame?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a guess. I mean, you know, the Trump administration had predicted that, you know, there would be 20 million doses distributed across the country by the end of this calendar year. And that I think we're roughly at 1/10 of that. So these predictions we have to take with a grain of salt. Right now, you know, we're a little over 100,000 vaccines that have been administered in Illinois. And of course, we're talking about, you know, a vaccine that requires 2 dosages. So it's gotten out of the gates pretty slowly. And I think, you know, really to have any kind of meaningful effect, we're going to have to see, you know, multiple hundreds of thousands of these vaccines given, you know, on a weekly basis in Illinois to really make a dent. The Pritzker administration, you know, they stick with that idea that by, you know, April or May, pretty much everybody is going to be able to go to their doctor's office or to the pharmacy and start getting these things and getting access to them. But a lot of it's just going to hinge on the rollout and the distribution. And so far, that's been pretty rocky.
All right, we're going to be talking about this the entire year, but let's recap 2020 in politics. Joe Biden defeats Donald Trump in a high turnout election, but Trump pushes baseless claims that it was stolen from him. Pritzker's graduated income tax goes down to defeat. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx wins re-election despite criticism over Jussie Smollett. And the walls close in on Mike Madigan as federal investigation ensnares his allies and 19 Democrats say they will not support him for Speaker. And we can't forget former Governor Rod Blagojevich comes home. That happened this year. Yes, it did. Full of bluster and bravado after Trump commutation. So let's start with the presidential election, Laura Washington. The president continues to foment distrust in the election. Majority of his supporters believe that there was a lot of fraud, even though there wasn't. What is the ultimate impact going to be heading into 2021?
It's very distressing. I think the impact is going to be that he's going to be able to continue to keep his base together, which is his intent, to keep his base behind him, to keep them strong behind him based on this lie about the election. And he's using this lie partly to raise money for himself and for the party, but partly to continue to build strength in terms of his political future. He's now ruling out that he'll run for president again. And it's a very dangerous perspective. It completely undermines confidence and credibility in the electoral system. You have these Georgia elections, the elections for the Senate coming up next week, and there's a lot of skepticism in Georgia about, especially particularly among Trump supporters, about whether or not to show up at the polls because they think the election's been stolen. So it's going to continue to be a problem, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, or it's going to be another added problem for the Biden administration when he comes into office if this shadow of questions about him being legitimately elected continue.
And of course, a lot of money has been raised off of these allegations, leading to critics calling it a grift, just continuing to push these narratives out there. Let's talk about the graduated income tax. Steve Daniels, it failed to pass despite $25 million plus being thrown into there by Governor Pritzker. What ultimately happened?
Well, I think what ultimately happened was he lost the narrative battle, and there was just as much more money put in on the opposing side by billionaires and wealthy business interests in Chicago, and the story, the narrative that they had in their ads that turned out to be extremely effective was, you can't trust the Democratic Party in Illinois to do the right thing once you give them this power. Eventually, it's going to hit you. They may tell you, middle-class Illinoisan, that this isn't affecting you, but it will. And that message resonated. And no matter how often the governor said that is not going to happen, he just lost that narrative battle. And he was banking on that quite a bit in terms of solving the fiscal problems, or at least a portion of the fiscal problems afflicting the state. So it is quite a political problem for him going into next year.
And speaking of that narrative, a big part of it was Mike Madigan, Dave McKinney, who is implicated in this ever-growing federal investigation into ComEd. 4 top officials earlier this year, federally indicted. They all have close ties to Speaker Madigan. Where do you think this investigation is going to go in 2021?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, I think, going to the extent that the U.S. Attorney's Office identified Madigan as public official A in the deferred prosecution agreement back in July, I mean, I think it was 72 times. It was clear that Madigan was in their sights. And I think moving forward that there is some likelihood that the feds could go, a step farther and go into his, go directly to him. But I think that it's going to require a lot of things. They've got to have cooperating witnesses, and so far the ones that they have, I mean, I think they would love to have, one of the people you mentioned who's been charged, Michael McLean. He's a longtime aide and former ComEd lobbyist. He has basically he told a colleague and me that he would consider it an act of betrayal to cooperate with the federal government in its investigation of Madigan. So they have a very real problem, the feds do, in getting the case built around him. But I think, for the short term, Madigan has a political problem. And as you mentioned earlier in the show, January 13th is when the Illinois House will come into session and decide on who the next speaker is going to be. And there is a big problem right now in whether or not he has the votes. Right now, if the vote were held today, he wouldn't have them.
But no one else has them either. So which leads to a very interesting scenario here where they're just going to have to vote and re-vote until the white smoke comes out of the the chimney here at the Capitol. So much talk. Let's move on to some of the criminal justice news from this year. George Floyd killing sparks protests here and across the country. Some of them devolve into violent unrest and looting as Chicago neighborhoods get leveled. Video of a botched police raid has Lightfoot on the defensive, and the city's murder rate soars to levels it hasn't seen in more than 2 decades. Kelly Bauer, most of the protests this summer were peaceful, but then it devolved, especially on that one violent weekend in early June, to real unrest and lots of looting. Was this kind of out of the control of city leaders like Mayor Lightfoot, or is there something that they could have done to contain this?
I think that when you speak to neighborhood advocates, they feel like the Chicago's neighborhoods were abandoned during that weekend in particular. The downtown area was sort of locked off. The CTA was shut down. Bridges were put up. Highways were closed and protected by the National Guard. But neighborhoods did not see that kind of protection, especially in early June. And that is where we saw a lot of damage, especially among commercial corridors where there were a lot of small business owners. So I think people did feel as if they had been abandoned by the city over that weekend. And during subsequent weekends, the city did put out, salt trucks, garbage trucks, more police presence in the neighborhoods. But I think that there was still that feeling that the downtown area was protected at the cost to more residential neighborhoods.
And to that effect, let's listen to some audio that we'd obtained early in the year of what was supposed to be a private meeting between the mayor and some city council members during the worst of that violence. Take a listen.
They're shooting like it's a wild, South. It's crazy. I got I have over 10 videos of people shooting at other people. Like, it's insane. Like, broad daylight, they're just shooting.
Yes. So, again, we are trying to bring in as many reinforcements as we possibly can.
So, the initial thoughts, first of all, there were 2 really bad bouts of property damage and looting this summer. The damage was extensive. Laura Washington, do you believe there will be lasting damage in the neighborhoods and in downtown due to what happened?
I absolutely do. It reminds me of what happened to our city in the 1960s when we had the civil unrest, particularly around the assassination of Martin Luther King. And if you go to the west side now, you see that the damage that was done from the many, many decades ago still lives on in the empty lots and the lack of economic development in many neighborhoods on the west side of Chicago. You saw that all over the city and not just in one particular neighborhood. And many of those neighborhoods still haven't begun to recover. My mother lives on the south side, and there's the Walgreens and the Currency Exchange and several other stores that are just a block or two from her home have still not reopened. The Walmart took 6 months to reopen. These are real impacts that are going to have long-term effect on neighborhoods that were already struggling, that already were deeply under-resourced in terms of economic development and access to amenities. So I think you're going to see the damage done there from years to come.
And you still see boarded up storefronts all across the city, in the neighborhoods and downtown. Let's take a look at some of the overall violence and homicide numbers this year in Chicago. As of December 27th, more than 3,000 people shot, 762 homicides, nearing the level seen in 2016, which was the deadliest year in city decades. Kelly Bauer, do most violence experts believe this is an anomaly this year because of all that happened, or is this a disturbing long-term trend? Violence went down in the city for 20 years, and is it on its way back up?
Most of the experts I've seen have noted that there have been significant rises in homicides and shootings, carjackings, other forms of violent crime in major cities throughout the United States. It's not just something that's happening in Chicago, it's happening in big cities and small towns all over the country. And they think that the pandemic has played a significant role in that. People are hurting, they're struggling with their mental health, people are out of work, they're facing being foreclosed on or evicted once those moratoriums are lifted. And those are all things that can contribute to rises in crime when people are desperate like that and when they're struggling like that.
All right, let's move on to the economic news of this year. Of course, it was a roller coaster year for the economy. The coronavirus shutdowns lead to high rates of unemployment, and they cripple state and city budgets that were already teetering on the edge. Meanwhile, cannabis proves to be a cash cow in an otherwise dismal fiscal year. Dave McKinney, we touched on the shutdown and the COVID impact on state and city budgets. Pritzker does not have the graduated income tax. He's proposed $700 million in cuts, but there's a yawning $4 billion deficit. And that doesn't account for pension debt and structural deficits that are going to be here for years to come. What is the long-term outlook here for the state budget?
Well, I mean, he has two options. I mean, one is to go about a cost-cutting push that would be akin to what we saw under Bruce Rauner for a couple of years. We could go that route. We could try to raise revenue in the state, which would be through taxes and fees. Speaker Madigan has talked about a willingness to go along with that if he survives as Speaker. Politically, I think it would be a difficult thing to engineer with his imprint on it, given how much political trouble Madigan is in. And I think Pritzker going into a possible reelection campaign, it's going to be hard for him to be behind a tax increase. So we've seen it before with Illinois governors for as long as I can remember, where we've had all of these structural problems with our finances that there's almost sort of a muddling through effect that happens. And I think that's probably the route that we see here, where you just you take a little here, take a little there, and kind of just cobble something together to get you through the year. And there's going to be some pain with the cuts, but the governor's hands are tied. That loss of the graduated income tax ties his hands. And really, I don't see a major push for the kind of revenue the state of Illinois needs until, the next term, whoever the next governor is.
Kelly Bauer, it's muddling through on the city level as well. Mayor Lightfoot closed a $1 billion plus budget gap with borrowing and a few new taxes and fees. What's the long-term outlook for the city budget?
I think that the city budget is going to be a struggle. It was a close vote to pass the budget this year, closer than I think most mayors have faced when they're doing this. And there was a lot of criticism leveled at the mayor because the city didn't do things like cutting the police budget, defunding the police department in any way in order to not have to make cuts in other areas or in order to not have to raise taxes.
Well, one potential bright spot, as we mentioned, was cannabis. This is the first year of legalized cannabis. Steve Daniels, how much money is it going to bring in, both as an industry and to tax coffers?
Well, it's brought in more than anticipated. I think we saw that the amount of taxes the state collected from cannabis in November, I think it was, almost equaled what they got from alcohol taxes. So it has been a bright spot in terms of the fiscal situation. Obviously, the overall story is one of doom and gloom, but you can imagine where we'd be without it. It would be even more of a nightmare. The other aspect of the cannabis issue or the rollout, the actual, making it available, dispensaries and the whole 9 yards is, it's been reasonably smooth. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy and discussion about equity issues associated with it. Are minority communities getting enough of a piece of the pie? And clearly they're not at this stage. So that's something that will need to be addressed, and politicians will force that to be addressed. But in terms of a functioning industry sort of built from the ground up very quickly, in light of everything that happened this year, I think it's fairly remarkable.
Laura Washington, Steve mentioned that it didn't go in terms as planned in terms of social equity component. What needs to happen in 2021 to fix that?
Well, there needs to be a series of new contracts or new opportunities for some of the social equity applicants, particularly people of color and businesses of color that didn't get into the first round. And the governor and his team are looking very hard at that. But I think, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and it's important to bring in the significant revenues at a very much needed time. But just like everything else that's going on in our society right now, we have to assure the public and assure voters that we are going to make sure that things are done in an equitable way, particularly for the communities that have been left out of the conversation for so long. So that remains to be seen. A lot more work needs to be done on that.
All right, well, 2020, it was a lot of work to cover. You all did an amazing job doing it, and thank you so much for being here with us today. Steve Daniels, Kelly Bauer, Laura Washington, Dave McKinney, I wish you all a wonderful new year, and that is our show for this Friday night. For more on the top stories of 2020, please visit our website at WTTW.com/news, and don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news, and we're back at 7 o'clock next week. So for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe. Once again, Happy New Year and good night.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.